This session is called Talk It Out. This session explores the importance of honest conversations around mental health and well-being at every age. From the pressures young people face to the hidden struggles of adulthood and the emotional transitions of menopause, we'll see how mental health and nutrition work hand in hand to build stronger, more resilient families and communities. So allow me to introduce one at a time our panel. Our key moderator for this session is Evonne Boka. She's a communications consultant who specializes in helping organizations build connection and trust through clear, authentic storytelling. She's passionate about using communication as a tool for well-being, and today she's guiding us through one of the most important conversations of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, Evonne Boka. Up next we have Kirsty Baxter. Based in Harare, Kirsty has spent years helping individuals and families build healthier, more sustainable habits, translating nutritional science into everyday life. Her practical, human approach has empowered people to see food not as a restriction, but as a pathway to emotional balance, resilience, and vitality. She's one of Zimbabwe's most trusted voices in nutrition and lifestyle medicine, and her work continues to shape how we think about health across generations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kirsty Baxter. And last but not least, we have Professor Dixon Chibanda. He is the founder of the world-renowned Friendship Bench Initiative, which has trained over 4,000 community health workers and is now integrated into Zimbabwe's national health system. A professor of psychiatry at the University of Zimbabwe and of global mental health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, his groundbreaking work has transformed how communities across the world access mental health care. And today is truly a special moment, as this marks one of the first times at an event such like this that Professor Chibanda has ever graced the stage in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, this is monumental. Professor Dixon Chibanda. And with that, over to you, Evonne.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you, and a very special welcome to our panelists. Today we're going to talk about mental health across generations. And just a reminder, you've got notepads, you can jot down your questions, and you can ask your questions during the question and answer session later. So this is a conversation, it's talking it out. I'm not the specialist in these fields, so thankfully I've got Dixon and Kirsty to help me and to help us unpack what it means to be well mentally and what is the link between food and our mental health. Okay, so to begin, we often look at mental health and nutrition as two separate entities. But can you please spend some time bridging the gap for us on that? Because they're so deeply intertwined.
I'm happy to start, Dixon, thank you. So we know that there is a bidirectional link between the gut and the brain, and hence food is really not just for energy. Our brains are really relying on the food that we're putting in our stomach that will then help nourish the brain and get our different hormones, so serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, our feel-good hormones, getting these really working optimally, because 70% of serotonin is actually metabolized in the gut. So it's not about taking that selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, it's actually about also making sure that your microbiome in your gut is actually fed with all the right nutrients.
Thanks, Kirsty. Just to probably add to that on a not so palatable note before you all start to eat, there's growing evidence that shows that the poop of depressed people and the poop of non-depressed people is very different. Now, we don't know how different it is in Africa. And so one of the research studies that we're planning at Friendship Bench, I'll talk a little bit about Friendship Bench later on, is to actually look at people who come to Friendship Bench to seek services, who are depressed, versus those who are not depressed. So we could better understand what it is that makes them different with regards to the poop. Because there's something called fecal therapy, again, not very pleasant, but it's a way of treating a wide range of conditions, including some of the mental health challenges that people face. And so we're moving into this very cutting edge form of therapy, which really focuses on understanding what's in the gut, particularly what's in your poop. So it's very important what you eat, and we'll be touching more on that as we go along.
Well, thank you for those perspectives, and I think it just really shows us that there is a link between food and mood, and that really sets the frame of what we're going to discuss today. So I'll start with you, Dixon. You spent years breaking barriers on mental health, but what still stops people from seeking help, like having these conversations, in your view?
That's a great question. That's really a great question. I think what stops people from seeking help, firstly, is the over-medicalization of human suffering. We tend to place people into these categories when it's not always necessary to do this. And this is something I've observed. Across the world, because we are implementing Friendship Bench in different parts of the world. Whenever we place people in categories, when we medicalize what they are going through, the response from the community is always different, as opposed to when you focus on the human story. I think this is why Friendship Bench has been successful. We focus on the story that you bring to the bench. So I think if we are truly going to reach out to people who are struggling, let's not focus on the diagnosis, but rather let's focus on the story, because every human being has a story to tell.
Well, thank you for that. I think it really paints the picture for the challenges that we are still facing, but opens up dialogue. We can start talking about these conversations. Over to you, Kirsty. Families share food traditions across generations. We have the Sunday lunches, the feel-good food. How do we honor our culture while still encouraging healthier habits for all the members of the family?
Sure, thanks Evonne. A good question again. I think we're in such a fast-paced world. I often hear mums saying, we just don't have time. We don't have time to nourish ourselves, let alone, prepare everything for the family. I think what we can celebrate so nicely in Zimbabwe is we have a lot of beautiful food that comes out of the ground, and that's what we should be focusing on. Last year I did a talk in the UK, and I was absolutely gobsmacked at, you go to the shop and 95% is in a box, and then you've got to ask where the vegetable section is. We're very lucky here. So I know we all pushed for time, but if we're not nourishing our gut and we're not nourishing our bodies with real food, there are far too many quick stops where you can get takeouts now. If we're not focusing on those foods at home, we can't necessarily get our brains working, but our bodies are also not working. So I think the thing to do is to really try and prioritize, when you can, how important food is. And I think that can set the tone, because I know we're all rushed up for time. We're out early in the morning, the traffic is crazy, the kids are going to school early, and we're in an era where everything is a quick fix. So can I pick it up in a packet and put it in the lunchbox? Really try and look at using some of our beautiful whole foods. Then on weekends, yes, there's a treat. There's maybe the roast. There's a braai, which is quite popular here. Again, these are don't need to be unhealthy. So it's about the oils that you're choosing. Are you choosing olive oil when you can? Are you keeping the high inflammatory saturated fats like sunflower oil? Are you keeping those to a minimum? Are you rather, and the air fryer is big now, which is great because we are seeing a lot less deep fried saturated foods or saturated fats. So choosing a rainbow of color of foods Also encouraging children, I mean, when I look at the age groups here, maybe there are not many young children, but if we can encourage them to look at different colors, a rainbow of colors on their plates, and encourage them to try those things, as opposed to they'll only eat fries or they'll only eat, deep fried potatoes, we can actually set a different tone. And in this way, having a traditional meal is not necessarily unhealthy. In fact, sadza is not unhealthy. It's not super refined like in South Africa, and it's what you put with it. So beautiful greens, rape, kale, kovo, all of these greens, these are really important, and then a good clean source of protein. So I think we're very fortunate in this country, and we should try not to lapse into buying things that have a barcode on, because then they really are processed. When you look at the back of a product and most of it is non-food, well, then you know it's processed. So really opting for real food out of the ground. Carbs are not the enemy, it's how you prepare them, it's how much of them you're having, it's when you're having them. So really that's just sort of my takeaway there.
But on the other end of the spectrum, are you finding that people are embracing, you look at people going back to whole foods or traditional foods or fermented foods, is that something that people are going back to?
Indeed, I'm very happy. That's why in this country I love practicing here, because there is really a push to eat real foods. We've got lovely local companies making fermented foods. We've got farmers markets where you can get a good quality organic, which is lovely. Again, no pesticides, no additives. So yes, I see there is a big push towards being healthier, and I cannot express it more. We will talk a little bit later about menopause, but being in it for 7 years, ladies, men as well, you have to take care of your health every single day. Make that choice, not to be skinny, but to be healthy. So do what you need on a food side. We'll talk about exercise later, on a mental health side, because what you're doing for your gut is going to help your brain, you're going to cope better, you're going to just get everything working to that wellness standard that we'd like to be at.
Thank you for that. I want to cross over to...
I'd like to just add to that, if you don't mind.
Please do.
My grandmother lived to a ripe old age of 104. And what my grandmother always used to say was, ask yourself what your ancestors used to eat. And, touching on that, I was in Germany, in Berlin, at a conference. And at this conference, we went out for dinner, and they served us insects. And they were like, this is the new trend. It's an alternative form of protein, and it also mitigates against climate change. And they made a big deal out of it, and everybody was excited. But it just shows you that when you repackage things that our ancestors used to do for centuries, it suddenly becomes sexy, eating, insects, ishwa, madora, those kind of things. And so I think it's very important that we lean into our sort of historical, ancestral knowledge around nutrition, if we are really going to strike that balance.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it ties in so well, and we see there is real that food and mood. Yeah, that really shows. Okay, so over to you, Dixon. So different generations view mental health differently. So I'll ask my mom about it. I'll ask my sister, my friends. They all have varied opinions about it. But how can we holistically have these conversations about mental health and to improve our society, given all the different perspectives?
Thanks. That's a great question. I can only share what I have observed from doing the work that I do and visiting many different parts of the world. Regardless of the generation or the age group that you are dealing with, I find that there are three fundamental pillars that bring us all together. And whether you're in El Salvador, in the UK or Zimbabwe, every single human being wants to have a sense of purpose. Everyone wants to feel a sense of belonging, and they want to feel connected. And so regardless of whether you are struggling with schizophrenia or major depression, when we lean into those three pillars, we actually can make a difference in people's lives. Some of the work that we do is in Washington, D.C., in a place called Anacostia. And we increasingly find, in Washington, D.C., that just creating a sense of purpose, belonging, and connecting people makes a huge difference, regardless of what conditions they have, and regardless of the actual age gap or difference between people. So I would say those three things are critical. We can talk a little bit later about how to actually lean into them and how to achieve them.
Evonne, may I add to that?
Yes, please.
It's very pertinent. So we know about blue zones, and what are they doing in blue zones? This is where we've got the highest number of centenarians. And what is the commonality? They are in a community basis, getting in, growing their own vegetables, working together. If somebody's sick, everyone's moving around and going to look after that person. And this is why they're living so long. I know that we are in a fast-paced city, and you drive on the roads and you feel like you need a session with your psychiatrist or your psychologist because it's quite manic. But that sense of community is proven world over, and I think we do have a lovely sense of community. I feel very at home here. I love Harare, and it's because of the people that are here that have really made me feel at home. And so really engender that within your own society. And so that means that like-minded people are coming together and you're sharing the things that you enjoy. And there are flip sides. There's other big drinking cultures, etc. And we'll hear about that later. But again, pull in those people that uplift you on that level that you want to be at. That's just important.
Thank you for that. I like that you talked about how fast-paced we are nowadays. And every generation has its own food and wellness rule. And Dr. TikTok, seems to know it all. So it's a big influence. So how do we separate truth from trend and decide what's worth keeping and what we should chuck away?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I have people coming to me with TikTok videos saying, well, this is what I saw. And I think it's a lot harder for a younger generation. So for our children, they are highly influenced by influencers, literally on TikTok. So I think here it's an open discussion. It's also, we unfortunately as parents or adults have to engage with TikTok to see what they're looking at, so that they can show you what they're looking at, so that you engage with them and then start that dialogue, which is non-judgmental, but helping them understand that there are other ways that we can look at certain things that they're being exposed to, that, because we're adults, we've got the exposure, we've got the connections, we can then get them to chat to other people about what they're seeing on an influencer, because we cannot discourage it. We cannot just, sweep it under the carpet and say, well, it's rubbish and, don't bring it into the home. And then again, obviously looking at trying to direct them to other sources. We are in this era of AI, and AI is also not perfect. It doesn't have all the answers. It's giving you a version, and it's going to continue to improve. So it's very powerful and enlightening, but maybe helping your children understand here are other perspectives and having that open dialogue.
But I also think as adults, we're also influenced. I mean, I see on TikTok the kind of carnivore diet. I see all sort of diets, and it's also hard for us to, filter.
100%. So again, going to professionals, and I deal with this a lot, and like I say, nowadays people are coming with their iPads saying, well, I've come with this condition and this is what it says, and I just want to see if this is correct. So again, going to hopefully more educated sources when you've seen something, and then looking broadly at it. So for example, and I just want to talk about the carnivore diet because it is the rage, and it's one of the new things to lose weight. What we haven't seen, and it takes 5 to 10 years to actually generate real research evidence on what a specific approach is doing. And the same will be for GLP-1. So we're seeing that now there's some really scary information coming out, and I'm talking about Manjaro, Wegovy, Ozempic. On the carnivore side, what we haven't seen yet is, while yes, it's helped some gut symptoms and it's helped weight loss, one of the fundamentals of colon cancer is that you have very low levels of butyrate. Butyrate comes from fiber. Now, if you're eating a diet that is solely red meat or only meat protein, you'll be getting zero amount of butyrate. So while it's working for you now, what we don't know yet down the line is that going to predispose you to more colon cancer. Red meat has an inflammatory molecule called arachidonic acid omega-6. It's inflammatory. Again, what are we going to see of the knock-on effects of this? So I think we're in such an information age, but we're also so busy that we just focus on one thing because that's what we want to achieve. We are getting older all the time, and what we need to do is look holistically at what we're doing and deciding, am I making all the right choices? Do I need to really look a bit broader before I go down one road?
Well, thank you, because you've done all the research for us, so I highly recommend seeing Kirsty. Okay, so let's take stock of what we've heard so far. Mental health, food, and culture are deeply interlinked, and the way we approach this shapes individuals and whole generations, our communities. And I just want to say thank you for talking us through that. And now we're going to shift gears and talk about menopause. Right? So, I think menopause affects men. I don't know as much as women, but it does affect men as well.
And they live it vicariously.
They live it vicariously. So I'll ask you. I'll ask Dixon. Menopause is often misunderstood. What's one simple way for someone to embrace this stage and acknowledge its place in their life?
Thanks. So I am not an expert on menopause, but I can share what I have observed and what I generally tend to advise my patients. In the United Kingdom, where I spent some time, considerable amount of time, there's a real push to acknowledge menopause, a lot more than in this part of the world. In fact, people start screening for menopause much earlier than we would think they should. By the time you're 40, a lot of people are aware of where they stand. But what I would like to share, when I started realizing that there was a need to consider menopause in a lot of the patients that were coming to see me with symptoms of depression and anxiety, and I know HRT is very controversial, but I observed that when a lot of my patients went on HRT, those symptoms of depression and anxiety tended to disappear. So if you're feeling depressed, anxious, it might not be because you're depressed or you've got anxiety, but it could be because maybe you're getting early symptoms of menopause and you might need to be looked at.
Can you explain HRT?
I will leave that for Kirsty to explain and go deeper.
Please do.
All right, so thanks, Dixon. Great observations as well in practice. So, hormone replacement therapy is not the devil. Menopause is a phase of our lives that we will go through. It can be early induced through an early hysterectomy, but if you still have your ovaries, you will still produce your hormones, estrogen, progesterone, etc. So we will be going through it, and unfortunately, it did get a bad rap, which we'll talk about a bit later. Or can I talk about that now? So in 1991, there was a study done called the Women's Health Initiative, which looked at 68,000 ladies. Now, in terms of participants for a research study, that's huge. They were looking at postmenopausal women and the impact on cardiovascular disease and cancer. The study was halted, but unfortunately, and it was halted for very good reasons, because some of the things that they were doing were actually, they had the wrong population, so the wrong participants. Back in the day, in 1991, they were using equine estrogen, so from horses, right? And so what they found is that the study actually wasn't looking at the right things, and they actually halted the study. Unfortunately, some of the data got leaked to the media, and as a result, HRT equals cancer. That came out of that study, and that is completely wrong. Ladies, the one thing we do need is estrogen. Estrogen is good for our brains, memory, cognition. Estrogen is good for our muscle, our musculoskeletal health. Estrogen is good for ensuring that the linings of our bladder and our kidneys and our uterus remain thick and intact. So this is why we need estrogen. So obviously when you're going into menopause, there's pre, peri and menopause, and then there's post-menopause. You do want to do your checks with your GP or your gynae, and you do want to check certain levels. You do want to check your bone health. You want to do your pap smears. You want to do your mammograms, or preferably your 3D breast scan. You need to check these things out first. Is there a history also of breast or cervical or ovarian cancer in your family? These need to be highlighted. But based on all of those bloods, you need to then make the decision. There are a number of different options available. I can't get into it, we just don't have the time. But ladies, estrogen is vital. Depression, which is part of menopause, can be a huge problem when your estrogen is really low. Unfortunately, we can't talk a lot more about it, but that gives you some insight.
Thank you for that. Okay, and for the men in the room, outside, okay, I'll ask Dixon. For the men in the room, outside of improving a golf handicap, what can they do to support the women in their lives?
I guess you can support the woman in your life by also getting checked yourself, because men tend to not go for their annual checkups, you know. Again, after the age of 35, get your prostate-specific antigen. It's uncomfortable, but get that finger up your ass. Go for your colonoscopy. It's important, you know, and also try to understand when your partner is going through premenopausal and menopausal phases in their lives. Again, we don't have the time to go into much detail.
Thank you for that. Thank you for literally painting the picture in our minds. So now we're going to open up questions. We've got questions to ask. We've got one question there. Get a mic to Mel.
Hi, I think this one's for Kirsty. So with your pre-menopause, I wanted to ask what foods can help and habits can help with like fatigue, mood swings. I find that sometimes I'm feeling miserable and my fatigue is being extreme. And you can have a busy day, even though you're eating well, your energies are still quite low. And you tend to pick on the wrong foods.
Very good question, thanks Mel. So ladies, protein. Protein is really important. Start your day with a good source of protein. If you're choosing carbohydrates, make sure that they are slow releasing carbohydrates, but make sure that you have that combination of a protein and a carb with breakfast, lunch and dinner, and very importantly, add the green vegetables in. Fatigue is a real thing. Very important in that sphere is to have enough sleep. So getting to bed at an early, regular hour, having more than 8 hours, which we're seeing more and more, very, very important. And adding in magnesium. So magnesium glycinate, the most absorbable form, crucial at high doses, helping you getting deep sleep. It's involved in over 300 pathways, so you cannot go wrong. Add those in and make sure your hydration is also right for the day.
Thank you for that. I hope you got your answer. Another question here?
My question is for Dixon. You mentioned earlier that across the world there's 3 pillars that you found are common to what people need. So the sense of purpose, sense of belonging, and a sense of connection. I just wanted to ask you to maybe unpack belonging and connection, because when I hear them, they sound almost very similar. Like, I can't imagine, what does it look like for someone to feel like they belong, but aren't connected, or to feel connected, but not belong?
Thanks, that's a great question. So, purpose makes sense, correct? So, and again, this is based on the descriptions from the different parts of the world. So some people will talk about belonging as in being a part of a wider group. I like to understand or conceptualize belonging using the African concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are. In a lot of places, that's what they are talking about. Then the connection is more to do with being in touch with a real human being, not through social media, but face to face. You know, that person you sit down with and have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, you know, regularly. So that's how they've kind of differentiated them.
I have a question for Dixon over here. It's about intergenerational relationships. So like, my brother grew up on Rambo and Chuck Norris. I grew up, unfortunately, because I'm the last born on Oprah Winfrey, so I didn't have a choice in that. But what it does is it makes it difficult to find pathways to relate on how to talk about this subject. I have very different sensibilities to this, as to my brother, as to my father. What are some tactics that you can give each of us to be able to talk to each other, but still respecting that we have a totally different background to this?
Thanks, great question. And again, I will base it on what I have observed across the world. And I would say the most important single thing that we can all lean into to reach out and have that collective togetherness is what we call at Friendship Bench expressed empathy. Expressed empathy is the ability to make other people feel respected and understood. You know, it kind of respects a lot of those boundaries. We actually spend a considerable amount of time at Friendship Bench just training people to appreciate empathy as a tool, how you can use it to connect with people who are completely different from you. So it is possible. So it's zeroing in on expressed empathy. And again, we can talk a little bit more about that. But there's a friendship bench there. You can also sit on the friendship bench and they can tell you about expressed empathy.
Thank you. I'll take 2 more questions.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, sorry.
My question is for you, Kirsty. How important is it to take supplements for people that are busy and are not always able to have balanced meals throughout the day? And NAD is all the rage right now. NAD supplements, NAD? How important are those?
Thank you again, a very good question. So the supplement industry is as big as the pharmaceutical industry, and we have to be careful because there are so many different brands all claiming that they're the best. It is important to look at your nutrients and your supplements in terms of bridging the gap between what you're eating and what you possibly are missing. So there are a number of different functional tests that one can do, or even a couple of minor blood tests one can do to look at nutrient deficiencies. But again, you want to go for good quality. When you're looking on the back of a supplement box, it shouldn't be having fillers and additives, and a lot of them do. They add maltodextrin, or for little children they're putting in sugar so that they taste good and they can chew the gummies and that my kids love them, etc. So yes, supplements can be a very important part of your day or your diet. Again, good quality. In terms of NAD, so there's a lot of that. NAD, which is helping to supplement with your energy cycle, so in your ATP levels, also looking at an antioxidant. You've got NAC, so NAC is also a big one. Again, see a professional so that they can assess whether this is good for you. And the other thing that I always look at is drug-nutrient interactions. So you have to know what drug somebody is on and to know there are some drug-nutrient interactions, so not just taking anything because you've seen it as a latest fad. And then lastly, a multivitamin is often more of a gimmick than anything else because it's got 1 mil and 1 IU and 10 this. Rather look and get your whole diet assessed by a professional and then decide with that professional what you need to add in than just taking, for example, a fizzy. So a multivitamin or vitamin C that's a fizzy, you actually lose 30% in the effervescing in the glass. And then they add sugar. So it's more of a gimmick than an actual supplement. But good question, thank you.
Thank you for that. Got one question here.
families cope with the internet? How do you help families negotiate the good parts of the internet, but the bad parts of the internet?
That's a tricky question. So I'll speak from I guess from what I have seen that is common across the different countries that we are operating as Friendship Bench. And what seems to help families when it comes to striking a sort of balance between internet use and any other alternatives that you may have is, again, going back to what I touched on earlier on. When families understand each other's purpose and what it is that brings them together, as in belonging, and what connects them, you can have a healthy relationship with internet. You can have what is called screen time, where families go on the internet and families decide this is when we get together. You know, is it dinner? We have dinner all together, and because it's an important value, it's an important anchor in that family that helps us to really enrich that sense of belonging and all those kind of things. So I think it's understanding the anchors that bring the family together first and foremost, before we can even start looking at the differences in terms of internet use or how they navigate that space.
Thank you. Just one last one here.
I just want to add what Dixon Prof said about the role of men in menopause. I think there is a very significant role for men in terms of providing psychosocial support to the woman, could be your wife, who is going through menopause. Menopause is very distressing from my own experience with my wife. It is important for men to understand the biological changes that are going on in a woman. And if you do not know, it's important that you get that information you need about it, and then you explain to your wife, to your partner who is going through menopause, so that she understands the change, the biological change that is going on. So men have got a more significant role in terms of providing psychosocial support to your partner who is going through menopause. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Fortunately, we can't take any more questions, but our panelists will be around us to get more information. And yes, they are in the information packs. The information is there. So thank you again to our panelists for the honesty and the wisdom. And thank you to our audience for leaning in. I know we barely scraped the surface on most of these areas, but yeah, the panelists are here, and there's so much information that you can get. And yeah, we're done. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause. Thank you, our panelists. You are welcome to take back your seats.